These are my 25 easiest non-negotiables for longevity and just overall health. Now, the interesting thing is there's going to be a fair bit of fat loss stuff sprinkled into this as well. Why? Well, not just because everyone wants to be lean and this and that. No, because when you look at the literature and some of the top longevity experts in the world that I've interviewed on this channel, they all mention that having lower body fat, not low body fat, but lower body fat is going to be a huge, instrumental piece in a longer, healthier life. The inflammation, things like that, all stems a lot of times from excess adipose tissue. So let's go ahead and jump right into my 25 non-negotiables. Now, a lot of these things are going to be focused on the positive. I don't want to sit here and give you 25 rules. I don't want to make this negative. There are some rules in here and things to limit, but more it's things to do. Number one, and I mentioned this first, and I know it's not the most exciting, but I want to get it out there because everyone should hear it, and skip it if you need to. Whatever you do, it needs to be sustainable. It needs to have your mental health in mind, and relationships are the most important. I really think that that is the foundation. If your mental health and your relationships are not in place, none of the other stuff that I talk about can really make as big of a difference. It can make a difference, absolutely, but it can make significantly more of a difference if you have the foundation of mental health set in place. So for longevity and health, that is absolutely number one. Now we get into the more tactical stuff. Number two, prioritize, always prioritize non-exercise activity thermogenesis over anything else. What does that mean? It means if you could just move a bunch throughout the day or have 1 hour of a dedicated workout and then be sedentary the rest of the day, bar none, pick being active all day. Your non-exercise activity thermogenesis burns significantly more calories than your workouts do. You can burn close to 1,000, depending on the person, much more in the way of non-exercise activity thermogenesis. Most people in their 1 hour workouts are burning between 200 and maybe 800, but it all depends on the person. You can definitely go up from there. But a hard workout is very rarely burning more than 1,000 calories in an hour. And there's this thing called the constrained energy model, which demonstrates that when you do exercise a lot in the morning, or just in general, in a consolidated block, your body sort of down-regulates your activity a little bit subconsciously throughout the rest of the day, so you end up burning less calories, less fidgeting, less moving around. It just happens without you even knowing it, because we do try to find this homeostasis. So it's better to just use your workouts to get a good stimulus, push the intensity, but then let most of the work come from your non-exercise activity thermogenesis. And it comes right back to that first thing I mentioned, which was sustainability. It allows it to be sustainable. You're not destroying yourself. Number three, nutrient quality first, calories second. And I am going to get destroyed for saying this, but it needs context. We should always have calories in mind. Calories matter. Calories are the mathematical way that we can look at, hey, you're eating too little or eating too much. 100% understand that. But if nutrient quality is there, then satiety is there, and you're less likely to overeat. Period. If your body is getting what it needs and you focus on that and you don't eat the hyperpalatable garbage, you will not overeat. It's going to be significantly harder. And there is data to back that up. When people or animals eat refined, processed stuff, ad libitum, they will eat more. When you do that in a whole food fashion, it's very hard to really overeat. So focus on nutrient quality and let calories come second. I do feel that when we have too much emphasis on calories, it messes with our heads. Because then you're fighting, as Dr. Ben Bickman mentioned, you're fighting against hunger, which is a war that you will never, ever win. That is your biological system that is so much more deeply powerful than your willpower. You're not going to win that one. Number four, be cognizant, but not obsessed with, insulin. This goes in line with that other thing that I mentioned. See, how come we can't have a discussion where the calories people and the insulin people can meet in the middle? And what I mean by that is sometimes people say calories don't matter at all, it's all insulin, and other people say insulin doesn't matter, it's all calories. I think there's a thoughtful acknowledgement to both. Being cognizant of insulin is a very important thing. If you are aware of how insulin being consistently high is detrimental to metabolic health, then you could know when to bring it down. You can put carbohydrates a little bit in the crosshairs and say, hey, okay, I know that carbohydrates are something that I should probably have in a way that is not going to keep my insulin chronically spiked, right? You want to be able to control that and be cognizant of it, but you certainly don't want to fear it. Insulin is not the problem. It's not the enemy, but it also is the enemy for a lot of people with metabolic issues, and we need to be aware of that. And unfortunately, people with metabolic issues are a large percentage of the population. Insulin resistance is the largest disease worldwide. And as Dr. Ben Bickman also put it when I interviewed him recently, the United States is like 22nd in terms of insulin resistance in the world. This is a global issue, not just the US. So we do have an issue with focusing too much on one thing and not focusing on the other. Number 5, minerals are the life force for us. I don't take a lot of supplements. And even when you see this channel, like I mention things here and there, but most of the stuff that sponsor on this channel usually is food, right? Minerals are important, okay? Magnesium, sodium, potassium, trace minerals. If you're going to take supplements, a lot of times I would recommend minerals. Here's the bottom line. We don't need to add vitamins in through vitamins. We may very well need to do that with minerals though, because our nutrition, our diets are slowly becoming more deficient in minerals. So put the focus on minerals, put the focus on magnesium. That is the life force for us. And that is also the life force for hydration, which is a huge part of feeling good for a long time. Number 6, protein first. Prioritize protein, period. It doesn't matter if you're in a caloric deficit or not. I want you to prioritize the protein, especially if you're in a caloric deficit. We are now learning from the top longevity research that one of the worst things you can do is sacrifice protein and ultimately waste muscle, okay? We do not want to run into a situation where you get sick and cachexia kicks in and you start wasting. Put on as much lean mass and have that protein high as early in life as you can and sustain it. Number 7, prioritize GLP-1. Okay, that sounds cheesy, Thomas. I'm not saying prioritize peptides, prioritize Ozempic or Wegovy. I'm talking about prioritizing things that stimulate GLP-1 activation in the body. GLP-1 is going to keep you satiated. That's why they made a drug out of it. But stimulating it from a natural source or stimulating it through your diet is not even on the same chart as taking a pharmaceutical. Not even close. But researchers have clearly harnessed that mechanism because it is powerful for appetite suppression. So how do you increase GLP-1? Increase your fiber, increase your monounsaturated fat, your good quality saturated fat, decrease your polyunsaturated fat. The only amounts of polyunsaturated fat you should be getting in are like little bits from nuts, little bits from fish, things like that. Those don't need to be a staple in your diet. Also things like allulose. These are particular, like that's a very unique sweetener that stimulates GLP-1. These things are good, so focus on fiber, focus on protein, focus on the monounsaturated fats. Do research on which foods stimulate GLP-1. It makes a big difference in your appetite. Number 8, I know it's contrarian and cool to say the vegetables are bad, but deep leafy greens are good. They just are. Things like broccoli, yes, there may be some oxalate in broccoli, sure. But the sulforaphane is one of the most powerful compounds that we can consume in today's diet. So deep green broccoli, deep leafy greens. Yes, you should limit things like spinach because of the oxalates, I agree. But there are other leafy greens, there's arugula, there's low oxalate greens. Just because some greens have high oxalate, which we'll talk about later, doesn't mean all greens are bad. I am still in the camp that greens are probably good. In fact, I eat a lot of them and I do think they're good. Number 9, focus on your calories over the week, not over the day. If you are going to spend time fixating on calories, it's better to say, hey, what does my week look like? Because you could have a day where you consume 1,000 calories, a day where you consume 3,000, and that's fine. But as long as the end of the week you're in that slight deficit, ever so slight deficit, you're going to be okay. And if you focus on it like that, you give yourself miniature bulks and cuts throughout the week that are actually quite good for your body composition, and they keep your metabolism up and down, and keep you in a state where you're probably at a higher metabolic rate. Number 10, again, people might not like this one, but it's legit. Occasional longer fasts. When people look and they cite the evidence against intermittent fasting, saying it's no different than caloric restriction, they're typically looking at short-term fasts. They almost always are. Those studies are always looking at 12, 14, maybe 16-hour fasts, comparing them to caloric restriction. And in that particular short window, short case, yeah, they are kind of the same. But once you start pushing fasts for 24 plus hours, there are huge metabolic effects. There are huge caloric restriction effects. There are significant longevity effects, at least that we've seen in rodents, that are hard to replicate in humans because there's not a lot of studies that are looking at these longer term fasts, because a lot of things even consider them unethical in study situations. So you have to rely on like food logs and things like that when people aren't really fasting. So yeah, we do look at some of the rodent model research, we do look at some of the mechanistic stuff, but longer fasts, 24, 36 hours, occasionally, once every couple months, are probably a really good thing for most people, even if it just gives people a dang break from food. Number 11, become fat adapted more than not. What does that mean? That means we want the primary fuel source for your body, not the dietary source, to be fat. What does that mean? It means the more that we can allow our body to become more conditioned to being okay with using fat, the better. Most people are heavy carb oxidizers. That means that the staple of their diet is carbohydrates. Their staple fuel source is carbohydrates. So the body upregulates the enzymes and the actions to ultimately process carbohydrates. Well, simply by law of compensation, you start to lose the ability to process fats better. I'm not saying fear carbohydrates. I eat 100 to 200 grams of carbohydrates most days. But I do make sure that my body is fat adapted, where most of the time I am keeping it in a lower carbohydrate state, or most of the time I am training in a fasted state. What I'm doing is I'm conditioning my body to be able to use fuel reserves. If you do not occasionally teach your body to use fuel reserves, how is it ever going to know how to do it efficiently? Because then when you do go without food, your body is scouring looking for carbohydrates that you're not giving it. But if you can train your body that, hey, by occasionally like keeping carbs out of breakfast, or keeping carbs out of dinner, or training in a fasted state, you condition your body to become what is legitimately called fat adapted, and it's a very real thing. Which brings me to number 12. Dairy fat is a health food. People sit there and they demonize things like red meat because of the saturated fat content and things like that. Whereas most of the literature now is suggesting that the red meat isn't the problem. Usually it's the processed meat and stuff like that. Dairy fat, there's a lot of evidence to support that the C15 fats, the saturated fatty acid chains, the conjugated linoleic acid in dairy fat is not only cardioprotective, but also good for fat loss. That doesn't mean go guzzle heavy cream. It doesn't mean go like cheers the glass of half and half and cheese. What it means is use it almost as a supplement. Treat it that way. Oh, I need to get some good quality dairy fat. Rather than going for some trans fat garbage fast food, get some good quality dairy fat. Have some good aged cheese like Pecorino Romano. Pecorino Romano is a cheese that the Sardinians have been eating for hundreds of years, and they have some of the best longevity in the world, and their biomarkers suggest that they have the right phospholipid bilayers and just the lipids in general that are coming from their diet with minimal cardiovascular disease risk. I put a link down below for a 30% off discount link for Thrive Market, which is an online grocery store. It has all the different things that I'm talking about. Like you can get dairy snacks. You could literally get like cheese crisps. You can get all kinds of things, right? They are a quote unquote better for you option online grocery store. So you can do all your grocery shopping online, plus when you're using that link down below, that's saving you 30% off your entire first grocery order. So everything you load up in your cart, 30% off, plus a free $60 gift. But the thing is it makes it easy. You're not going to the grocery store and trying to find things and having to spend 2 hours. You can search. You can search by diet type. You can search by type of food, by dairy. You can search by sugar-free. It really makes doing the more complicated type of healthy shopping really easy. And it makes it much more affordable, and it makes it accessible. And I know that people are not always keen on online shopping for groceries, but I suggest you try it because it is a game changer, and especially with that 30% off discount link. So that link is in the top line of the description right underneath this video. Number 13 is something that's non-dietary. It is what is called Misogi. It is a Japanese tradition to do something hard, something mentally and or physically challenging every year as a way to almost purify your mind, body, and spirit. Now, I don't know a ton about Japanese tradition. I'm not gonna pretend that I do, but I know a little bit about Misogi based on guests that I've interviewed and based on books that I've read and based on how I live my life. And what that means is at least once a year, do something that is extremely challenging. And that doesn't mean like, hey, I'm gonna do one hard workout. It means do something big. You wanna climb a mountain, climb a mountain. You wanna meditate for 2 days, do something almost on the verge of extreme for you, right? That could be relative, right? But the idea is by doing something challenging, you are cleansing your mind, body, and spirit. So in ancient samurai tradition, it came from sitting under a waterfall where you were allowing the water to essentially cleanse you. Basically like a reset, like hitting that reset button on your life. And it makes a very big difference for mission and purpose, which is a huge reason people suffer with mental health issues, is lacking that challenge or mental fulfillment. Number 14 is, of course, prioritizing sleep. But the other side of this, and this is something that people don't talk about, is not obsessing over sleep. As someone that has struggled with sleep for the last 7 years, I will tell you the biggest improvements that I've made to my sleep have come from when I stop obsessing over it. I simply prioritize it. And it is a fundamental rule in my life that I go to bed at roughly the same time, and I follow the basic sleep hygiene, and I don't get obsessive and weird. When you get obsessive and weird, your sleep gets obsessive and weird. We are designed to be able to sleep. We are humans, we can sleep. All we need to do is give ourselves the basic parameters of going to bed at roughly the same time, not eating a few hours before bed, and having proper wind down period. But most importantly, create sleep pressure. You need to build up that adenosine and build up that pressure so your body actually wants to sleep. If you're sitting down all day staring at a computer screen and then you wonder why you can't sleep, what the heck? You're literally not creating any sleep pressure. Get up and move. Your body is only going to want to be triggered to have this recharge mode if you're actually pressuring it a little bit. Number 15 is one I talk about all the time, and it definitely is important for fat loss, and that's G-Flux. It is much better to eat more and move more than it is to ultimately eat less and subsequently move less. And even if you starve yourself and you try to move more, your caloric output's not going to be as good because your metabolic rate's lower. You want more energy moving through a system. Sounds crazy, but you want to eat more and move more so that your net deficit's the same, but it's coming much more at a higher level. More energy moving through a system keeps your metabolism burning strong. Number 16, be cognizant of oxalates. They are a real thing. Our body will create oxalates, but we cannot clear them. Does that mean you need to be afraid of almonds and be afraid of spinach? Heck no, consume them. But don't go insane on it because they don't really leave your body. Oxalates can build up in the kidneys. They absolutely do. When I had Dr. Jacob Torres on here talking, he's a kidney scientist. Oxalates are a very real issue, very real thing. Okay, and they don't clear, and they do build up. They build up in your blood and in your joints, and eventually can cause problems. So be cognizant of high oxalate foods and just reduce them and replace them with other things. Replace spinach with arugula, etc., etc. Number 17, don't fear caffeine. Now I say this because caffeine really, the studies demonstrate, hey, people that consume caffeine have less frailty because they're more active. I would rather you be active, but consume caffeine from natural sources. Then you're getting it in its full spectrum, full matrix form. Green tea with protective antioxidants, coffee with protective antioxidants, green tea with a little bit more naturally occurring theanine, right? So you've got these things that are gonna allow you to buffer versus having an energy that's pure like synthetic caffeine. Number 18, do fasted workouts. I will die on this hill that a fasted workout is beneficial. You are in a nutrient deprived state. So of course, the stimulus when you train is going to be harder. Your body is going to adapt faster and harder. And I know from a weight loss perspective, people say, well, it's equal if you eat before or not. In the short term, I'm sure that's true. But long term, the metabolic changes that you make training fasted over weeks, over months, over years, over decades, oh, that adds up. Trust me. It definitely adds up, and it shows in your performance, and it shows in your ability to be fat adapted under the most extreme situations. Without going to exquisite detail, I will simply explain that when your body is efficient at training in a deprived, depleted state, you are more resilient. And resiliency seems to be quite key when you look at animal model and some human model research, at least for longevity. Number 19, treat sunlight like a vitamin. Period. Enjoy sunlight. Don't overdo it. You wouldn't overtake vitamin D, would you? You wouldn't overtake vitamin C, would you? Okay, so you're not gonna go out in the sun and bake and just be an idiot, but you are gonna go out and you say, hey, I haven't gotten enough today. I need to go soak up some sun. Or I need to get a little more tomorrow because I didn't get enough yesterday. If you treat it like that, it all falls into place. We need to stop the over-glorification of sun and stop the demonization of the sun. It is what it is, and we will have periods of it, and we will not. Number 20, when in doubt, eggs. Eggs have almost everything you need. You could probably survive on eggs. So when in doubt, get the eggs. When in doubt, a hard-boiled egg. That is a cardinal rule for me, and it's a non-negotiable. At least 7 eggs a week. Try to get 3 to 5 per day. But if I'm not hitting 7 per week, something needs to change in my diet. I consider them delicious, nutritious, and a life force. Number 21, limit refined oils. Wow, I sound like a real serious zealot, don't I? Limit adulterated, chemically produced, deodorized, refined oils. Come on, why is this an argument? Why is this something that people have to fight about online? This is a chemically adjusted, altered oil. Why on earth would that be okay in high amounts? Sure, a little bit here and there, it's gonna happen. But why would we have that almost as a staple? It's not a polyunsaturated fat anymore. It's a peroxidized fat that is garbage. It's peroxidized, it's oxidized, it is rancid. We don't need that oil. Prioritize monounsaturated fats, prioritize whole food polyunsaturated fats, maybe some nuts, maybe some seeds, maybe some fish, but we do not need refined oils. Number 22 is another negative Nelly one, and that's avoid high caloric combinations of fats and carbs together. A, we're dealing with a glycation issue if they're consumed in high amounts, but B, that is the standard American diet. And that is exactly what's wrong with the United States, is high carbohydrate mixed with high saturated fat in one sitting. Literally, in a clinical setting, literally how they induce insulin resistance is by adding a high amount of saturated fat. And literally how they can induce inflammation is introducing high saturated fat and high sugar. We know so much that it is a concept and a way to actually induce inflammation and problems. Do not combine high caloric fats and carbs together. That does not exist in nature. It does not belong in your body together. Number 23, your total volume load with your workouts is what matters. When you're trying to build muscle or you're trying to burn fat, it's not about finding just the proper amount. If you were to train in a 20 rep range and you were to do a relatively light weight because you were pushing 20 reps, all that matters is that you do enough volume so that your total amount of weight pushed is the same as if you were lifting heavy. Weight times reps, okay? Your load times your reps times your sets. What is your total volume? If I pushed 100 pounds for 10 reps, that's 1,000 pounds. And if I did 10 sets of that, that's 10,000 pounds. What is the total amount of pounds moved? That's all you need to pay attention to. Number 24, eat a big breakfast or a big lunch. Some people aren't breakfast people, but a lot of literature shows big breakfast, smaller lunch, smaller dinner is the best way for longevity and for sustainability and for fat loss. But I'm inclined to think that maybe a big lunch is better. Maybe a small breakfast or no breakfast at all, followed by a big lunch, followed by a smaller dinner. Last but certainly not least, number 25, I believe, and it's a non-negotiable for me unless the literature came back so strong, which it seems to be going the other way from that, meat is a multivitamin. Red meat is a multivitamin. It has so many vitamins and minerals that we seek out from a plethora, dozens of other foods that we can get in one simple serving. 1 or 2 servings. Doesn't mean you need to be a total meathead and eat 6 ribeyes per day and a brisket for dinner and then have bone broth and stew meat for dessert. No one's saying that. But a moderate amount of red meat is nutritious. As always, keep it locked in here on my channel. I'll see you tomorrow.